Okay, we'd like to welcome you to our city council meeting tonight. We appreciate your attendance here. We'll begin with Councilman Sorensen giving us our invocation and our pledge by Councilman Miller.
Our Father in heaven, we're thankful we can assemble tonight as city council and mayor and as members of the community and the city staff. We're grateful for the many opportunities we have to serve and to do those things which we always pray are in the best interest of our cities and never guided or directed by special interests or individuals that are concerned more about themselves than the overall good of the city. And help us to be in tune with that and always do what we think is the best for our city. And we're grateful to live in this wonderful place that we call home, and pray thou will continue to watch over us in our decisions that affect it. And we say this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Please rise and join me in reciting the pledge. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we'd like to welcome any scouts who are here, any students. I don't see any, but maybe so. Maybe in the back. You are welcome to come up here and sit with us if you would like. It's up to you, entirely up to you if you'd like to come see it from this vantage point, which is a little bit different. But you're also welcome to stay with your mom there, so it's up to you. But you're welcome here. If you have comments that you'd like to make, we just encourage you to. Kim Crane is here, and she has some basic things as far as your name and address that need to be filled out for the record. But you're welcome to make a comment to the council, and we'll be able to hear what's on your mind. We can't take any official action on anything that you say, but we're just more than pleased to hear what you may have a concern about. Okay. So do we have any citizens who would like to make a comment? Do we have one? Okay.
Do we need to make?
Oh, we need to get an approval for the meeting's agenda. Thanks, Mike. I need a motion for approve the agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the meeting's agenda as written.
I'll second.
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed. Great. While she's filling that out, let me go through the consent agenda. We have a couple minutes. We have a resolution for the annual meeting schedule, resolution and cooperation agreement on 911. Thank you. And ordinance in relationship to some definitions, approval of adoption of the auditor that we just had a presentation on, and then also a confirmation on 2 councilmen serving on the Employees Appeal Board. So anything that you'd like to have a discussion on? Okay, I'll entertain a motion then for approval of the consent agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda as written.
I'll second.
Okay, it's a roll call vote. Mike?
Yes.
Jason?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Liz?
Yes.
Craig?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. We have Carla. Is it Carla Amor? Amor, who's here to talk about regulation variance. So come on up and take 2 or 3 minutes. We'd love to hear from you.
How do I do this? Do I face you guys?
Yeah, you can face us, and
Okay.
we don't care about them back there. So you just give us your best shot here.
Okay,
So
I'm going to give you my best shot.
there we go.
Okay, first I want to introduce my son and my daughter-in-law, Haley, and their new baby, Ramon Lucas. And it's about them because I have a spot on 85 South, 800 East. All right, so this is the picture that I have here, taken last year. That's my little house, and this is the big spot here. So half of it is just field. So back in the day when they had water rights, then they just opened it up and it was garden. All right. So anyway, so I just want to go on about what has happened now to spark this. Is that I was just informed as we were paying the bond, which I'm sure that you guys all know, you pay a bond for the water and the sewer main lines as you're improving the lot. So we've gotten to the point where we could subdivide our lot. It is called a subdivision, even though it really is realistically just dividing our lot, which I am deeding to my son Ramon, and his wife Haley so that they can afford to buy a house. This is a starter home between the areas of 1,000 to 1,200 square feet. All right, so the little house that we have on my little thing right now, 800 square feet. The lot that it's on is 0.30 acres. All right, so I just wanted to give you just a couple little quotes here from Governor Cox, who is trying in his budget for January, which he's trying to get done, to help with some infrastructure to get 35,000 starter homes on the ground. Okay, so our builders, Home Sweet Home, they actually want to be their builders to do that. We're 45th in the nation as far as cost for houses. Our children cannot afford it. My daughter was just given a big lump sum from her in-laws to get into a house over in Saratoga Springs. It's almost impossible to even get a fixer-upper because my husband and I, that's what we do. This is about our kids, our future, the American dream, and the Utah dream, and making sure it is available to the next generation. This is what Cox said, okay? So he wants to specifically, as it's gonna get more specific when he gets this in gear, $150 million into building 35,000 new starter homes by 2028. Most of the money would go to the state infrastructure bank to ease the cost of the infrastructure needed for new developments like water, sewer, and roads. Now that part is really important. I want you to remember that part, okay? Most of the money will be going to the cost of infrastructure, and that's for water, sewer, and roads. The state infrastructure bank can provide low-interest loans for publicly owned infrastructure. That includes our Springville roads, if I'm not mistaken. Okay? Now, the reason that I say that is that right when we were about to pay our bond, which, normally, it's kind of hard to figure this out. I guess I could have done it on some kind of slideshow. But, normally you just pay to improve a lot to get on to the street at a right angle. Do you understand?
Yes.
Here's your street, here's your right angle going on. But what we've been now required to do, as my husband was coming in with the $13,500 to bond, we were required to go all the way to 800 East intersection to where my little house is, in addition to the 78 square feet. So another 150 feet of main line to improve that from 4 inches to 8 inches in diameter. So in addition to this, we're doing this. Okay, now Chris Wilson, who is the city engineer, he referenced this, although we had not been told this previous. We've been working on this for a long time, okay? And he referenced me to the code, city code 14-5-113 water facilities, okay? So I highlighted here for me to be able to tell, because I understand what it says. All improvements, whether on-site or off-site, which provide direct benefit to the subdivision shall be constructed and paid for by the developer. So in this case, I want you to be aware that I am a deeder. I am deeding this to my son. I'm not making a cent, okay? I don't consider myself a developer. I don't own any property over at Utah Valley Mall or anything like that. All transfer and conveyance of water rights shall be consistent with all applicable Springville city ordinances and resolutions. Culinary delivery system, both off-site and on-site water mains of not less than 8 inches in diameter shall be installed so that each lot may be served thereon. So I understand, I have seen this, that this is what the code is. Now, what I'm asking for is a variance. A variance is a request for relief from the strict application of zoning regulations to alleviate an unusual hardship to a particular property. For example, a homeowner may request that a room addition be permitted closer to a property line than zoning traditionally would allow. Now, the reason that I'm asking for a variance is that I do not have a hard, fast bid yet because this is so intricate. This is involving 150 square feet that's gonna go through the street. It's gonna cut down the water supply for a time for our neighbors. It's going to, upend all kinds of stuff. And it's gonna cost $75,000 as a general bid. That in no way is anything that is specific, but it is general. We can't afford that, okay? I don't have $75,000 in the bank. My son is dashing, and he's got $20,000 saved. And they just had their babe. They want to be able to have a home, and I want to be able to help him. I'm not gonna try and get really sentimental, but I am. This is my babe of my late husband, who was born after my husband. So he's a Ramon. His dad is a Ramon. His dad's dad is a Ramon. His dad's dad is a Ramon. And his little baby is a Ramon. And I just want the best for him. How do I get a variance? A variance is advice that grants a property owner relief from certain provisions of the zoning ordinance. When? Because of the particular physical surrounding shape or topographical conditions of the property, compliance would result in a particular hardship upon the owner. I believe that this is a particular hardship upon the owner. I believe that this is not considered your typical subdivision, but this is just me splitting a lot in half. I do have this that I printed out, and I just want to make sure that this is what I would fill out for a variance. Because if
With this type of variance, there's two different variances. And so Jeff, right over here, you mind raising your hand, Jeff? He's actually our city engineer. Who you've been talking to is our chief engineer. And then Brad Stapley, who's here, he's our public works director. And so this is a variance to the Board of Adjustment, and that normally deals with things like you talked about with setbacks and changes to a property. These two too, because I don't know all the details, but you can also do a variance to the city engineer when it comes to infrastructure. So there's two types of variances. And so we'll have to kind of look at it with respect to it. And then back here in the back, Josh Yost, I don't know if you've met him, but he's over community development. And so we can go in the hall and kind of talk through it, what if it's this one or if it's something to do with
yeah, we want to start
infrastructure.
getting this done so we can start running. Anyway, thank you for your time. and I
Thank you,
think
we
that I've
appreciate
got
it.
everything.
I think we got you headed in the direction of if you
There's
want
a lot
to.
of different options, ways to solve your problem, I think.
Wonderful.
Yeah, but then again, it could be expensive too. I mean, there's an expensive way and then there's a less expensive way. But yeah, I'm sure these guys will tell you what to do or suggest things.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate you coming. And congratulations on your new little one. I knew there was something going on there because there's just an awful big bump there, so.
Didn't we also, when we were asked earlier about even the word subdivide this, we were very happy to go ahead and do it, even though it didn't quite match at the time that required, seemed like it wasn't quite the size we needed. We had a conversation about this piece of property several months ago. Yeah, and we did a rezone on it to make it work.
Yeah.
So it's not like we have not wanted this to work.
It's on the corner of First South and 8th East.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But maybe you weren't even involved when we did this little change on that piece. It's right, I know right where it's at,
Yeah.
by the 12s.
Zoning, so we knew that we had to do that application, had to do the application for subdivision, so we got our surveyor and stuff.
Well, we got you heading the right direction, at least to get some solutions to be able to give you a chance to make a decision, so. Okay, so John Penrod can kind of head you in that direction, so. Good, thank you. Okay, Josh, we'll turn it over to you for public hearing and consideration of adoption of 1600 South Corridor Plan.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. It's been a long time coming to be in front of you with this consideration of this plan, and I have to start out with copies to hand out to you. Now, I'll just give you all a moment to read over that before we.
Josh, it's every time it has a new name. Wasn't it? Is this 1600 South?
Well,
Dry Creek. Now it's Dry Creek.
give us a minute.
Okay.
Our first,
Oh, that's what. Yes.
change that we made from council discussion was that the 1600 South Corridor plan is now the Dry Creek Community Plan.
Okay. Awesome.
To be clear, the Dry Creek community does not technically exist in our general plan, but we have to reevaluate our communities on the general plan because right now that whole area is part of the Evergreen community, which I don't think anybody that lives in the Evergreen area would say that's part of their neighborhood. And then everything on the north side of 1600 South is part of the Westfields, which in the current general plan is just one community from 400 West to the west side of the freeway. So there's some work we need to do there. But anticipating that, we're excited to call it the Dry Creek Community Plan.
Cool. I am too.
So it's the same plan, new name.
Chris, that's the way to honor you
Oh.
before you leave.
We tried to get the swords.
And I was promised they were going to name a clarifier at the sewer plant after me.
There's still time.
The second is on page 37. We've added a number of policy statements to address elements that we discussed in council and at planning commission last week. The first is that statement that Springville City will support the right of existing uses to continue to exist even as the surrounding land use changes. That was something that was brought up as a substantial concern from our neighborhood meeting 2 weeks ago. Then our planning commission discussion, we had a couple public comments. Mindy Wright expressed some concern over the location of the mixed-use village center, that it was not directly adjacent to some of the bigger primary arterial streets. And we had some discussion in council about why we located that where it was, including what Spanish Fork's plans are for their the property in Spanish Fork that's adjacent to this area, and its location on major streets but not on the major arterials, so that it can be a comfortable, walkable place and avoid some of the issues you have by putting one of those places on the intersection of major 5-lane streets. And then Chad Tripp asked the commission to be careful, or to include something in the plan to make sure that as we go into the zoning to implement the plan in the future, that we consider the interests of residents on the edge of the existing development, their setbacks, the character of their neighborhood. And then he also asked, Chad Tripp asked specifically that as we look to identify the actual locations of parks, not just where they should be allocated in terms of program and amount, that we make sure that they are accessible and serve existing neighborhoods well in addition to new neighborhoods. And then lastly, Hunter Huffman expressed some support for the his support for the plan, and was encouraged by our plan to implement it with a form-based code. So to address these comments from the Planning Commission, we added 2 policy statements. The first regarding transitions from existing residential neighborhoods to new development, and the second regarding the location of parks and open spaces. And that represents the entirety of changes other than some typos and titles of tables that hadn't been updated. that is all of the substantive changes we made to the plan since you saw it last week. And I'm happy to answer any questions or address any other concerns that you've come up with or seen in your review of the plan since we talked about it last week.
Questions for him?
Maybe just give us, I don't know who else, you had a Thursday night meeting. Can you just give us a brief recap how that went with the citizens?
Yeah, it was a very positive meeting. I don't mean it was productive. I also think it was positive. There was a good turnout. People I hadn't seen before in relation to this plan, as well as some of the typical, the big property owners and development interests. Questions were answered. I don't think anybody left with any unanswered question or outstanding concern other than that concern about protecting and supporting existing property owners and property uses. We discussed the plan, what the substance of the plan was, what it does, how it'll be implemented, and how it would affect people today and into the future as zoning is adopted, and how we anticipate the area to evolve and change and the mechanisms by which that'll happen.
I remember about a year ago, maybe we had a meeting when we were discussing a couple of particular piece of property, and there were several developers here that night that were chiding us because we didn't have a plan. Well, you don't just have a plan the minute you decide something, and I think this has been a really good process to at least have a kind of a blueprint. It's not set in stone, but now we can do what people want us to do and start getting specific. So I think you've come a really long ways in a year to be able to answer some questions and not be totally vague. In fact, much be more concrete than vague, but still not set in stone and say this is exactly what it's going to look like in 10 years, because it can't be. You can't know that much. I think it's been a really good effort to do it.
It's been done real well, and in reference to that meeting a couple of weeks ago that Josh talked about, Josh handled their comments very well. Every one of the comments were good questions. Some of them started to get maybe a little bit heated because of their concerns, but Josh handled them very well, answered them clearly, and I think everybody left kind of with a smile on their face. I was happy with how the meeting went. It was very well done.
Thank you.
Well, and I would also like to comment about going to the Planning Commission and to listen to the comments there. And I appreciate the trips sticking with us, because I know that they've been with us for a while and it's encouraging to see members of the public kind of stay on top of us so that we can make better decisions and so that we can have more perspective. And I just really appreciate it. And the comments that were made by Mindy and also Hunter, they were very helpful. And it just helps so much to know that the public is involved, and when you get them involved in the decision making, because it's a big deal and it affects a lot of people. So anyway, thank you. And thanks, Josh, for all of your work on this. I think it's a really great more than starting place.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to second that, what you mentioned with the trips. They first really got engaged in regard to the Westfield Central project, and we tried to really convey to the people that came out through that process that they were welcome and encouraged to stay engaged in the civic processes and land use processes, and the trips really have a couple years out. So we hope we can continue to have more, especially in that neighborhood, more people come out and engage with us regularly as we move the general plan and other plans forward.
Yeah, it's so helpful.
Okay, other comments or questions? Okay, we'll open this up for a public hearing and ask anybody in the audience who would like to address the council in relationship to 1600 South development to come forward.
I'll make a motion to close the
Oh,
public.
got a gentleman?
Oh, we got somebody coming. I must have been looking down at my sheet.
You almost made it.
I did. Yeah, it was close.
I'm Chad Tripp, 843 West, 1450 South. I most certainly appreciate Josh's efforts. I appreciate your efforts here as well. Appreciate your time. I appreciate the Planning Commission, their time and efforts with everything that has gone on with the city, especially surrounding our home in the Westfields area. We kind of did come a little bit behind the eight ball with that build across from Meadowbrook, and that was a very unfortunate situation. And so that was for us, it's kind of a warm up for what is to come, and that's why we've been a little bit more engaged with what's happening here, along with 1600 South. And so, again, just to reiterate what Josh said, and again, thank you, Josh, for everything. Was really just the transition. Of course, I know it's a 30,000 foot overview of, kind of a blueprint of what could potentially be. It's not set in stone, but as you know, when you color code things, years down the road when things start to kind of take hold, you look at those colors and you go, this is what was approved during council. We may not be around. I plan on being a resident of Springville for a long time. We don't plan on going anywhere. But those of you that are in the council now will, have moved on and do other things. And
Quite literally, some of us will be dead.
I know, yeah. And I think that's kind of the reason my in-laws aren't quite engaged in this. I mean, they're going to be engaged, but
Yeah.
I don't think they think they're going to be around either. But anyways, that's besides the point. My main concern, again, was just that the transition. We know that things are going to come in behind us. We understand that. We support it. We've come in from outside of Springville. We're not residents, lifetime residents of Springville. And so we understand that we had the opportunity to build and come in and kind of crowd areas that, that were fields, and those, people hunted in them and pheasant hunted, so on and so forth. And we did take up that space, but we are just hopeful that the transition behind us really can be more mild. We don't want to have tall buildings behind us, and really just to try to protect your residents that have been here a while, and maybe move out the taller buildings or the medium-high housing a little bit further out to where they're not right into our backyard. Meaning instead of transitioning from a medium-high residential to maybe just a medium, and then maybe go to a medium-high, something in that fashion, just so that we don't feel like we're going to lose our view. We're going to lose what we have in our backyards now, and we understand that and we support that.
Where's your house, Chad?
We're along 1450, so Dean Dahl, his property, you have the concrete plant, and then to the west of that is Dean Dahl's property. And currently there's cows and stuff, and I know people worried about some of the residents that live south on 51. We're concerned about people coming in and encroaching on what they have, their cows, and the smells and the flies and all that. We actually don't like the flies, but we feed the cows apples and different things. We love having them there, but we know those are going to be going away. But again, my ask is really just to be considerate of that. I know it's here, it's listed. I think it's slightly vague, but it's a great effort and it's appreciated. But that is my main ask, and I will hopefully get some more support along our road.
Let me help you just a little bit. It's not slightly vague, it's incredibly vague. And Josh has heard from me a number of times, and he's been very kind about his comments. This is a 30,000 foot view, as you mentioned. And after we do this motion, my intent was to look at Josh and say, okay, where's our next step? Because I know that we have a great interest in getting that properly zoned and looked and feel so that it's not vague. It's a pretty specific idea, so that as developers come in, they can look and see what it is we're wanting to have happen, rather than have it on the spur of the moment or under the pressure of the moment. So we very much so stay engaged with us over the next few years, because this is quite a long process, but we think the end product will be very pleasing to people overall.
Absolutely. And again, we 100% support that. We support the efforts of the city. We know you have our best interest. I know we had a little bit of a mishap with what's happening across from Meadowbrook, but
Right.
It's not that the effort wasn't there. I think that your intentions were good. It's just the way it, kind of came about.
We've learned from that.
Exactly, and that's what I'm afraid of happening is what is right directly behind some of the residents along the east side of that property. Those are medium-high housing, medium-high buildings. And although the setback is being more considered, maybe 100-foot setback, 150 setback, whatever it is, I don't know if that's really detailed in there, but I know their setback is far less than that. Slightly different, but it's still a large structure right behind, looking down into what you have, and nobody wants that. So,
Well, stay in touch with us.
but
And if you
anyways,
don't
I
hear from
appreciate-
us, please just make a phone call to Josh or myself, and we'll keep you in the loop. So,
okay, we'll definitely be engaged. Thank you for your time.
thank you. Anyone else?
Am I okay to close
Yep,
the public?
you are now.
Thanks for calling my bluff, Chad. I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
You have a motion? Do I need a second?
Second.
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, I'm open for a motion.
For what?
We have to approve it, but what does it say here? Oh, there you go.
Or the Dry Creek Community Plan.
The Dry Creek Community Plan.
Okay. Because it's a plan, not an ordinance or a policy or, okay, as present, okay.
Well, heck, I'll make that motion. I'll make a motion to approve the 1600 South Corridor, i.e. Dry Creek Community Plan. And that's my motion. I approve it.
I'll second it.
It's not a roll call vote, it is just a voice vote. So those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, Josh, my question is, when's our next step?
What's next?
We'll give you Christmas off. Do you want to get with us, though, with the new council and kind of outline a timetable so that we can kind of work with you and that sort of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got the general plan requests for proposals out open right now, and that's going to be really our next big step, get rolling in that, and then as we get into that process and get into the new budget year, we'll take this step towards really kicking off the code reform, code update to be able to implement this and all the other work we've been doing.
Okay. So, like, when would that be? I'm going to talk with you after. Trying to pin you down, but I understand. Okay, Carla, you're number 8. This is a review of the Springville City Code, Title 11 and Title 14.
Oh, okay. I thought wires were gonna be the same place. Okay. So we went over this in work session. I feel like I am just could have put that on repeat for you. The one thing that I wanted to clarify a little bit as we went through this was the process that we currently have in place and how this legislation will impact the amendments that it's requiring will impact that. So currently our development review process, an application is made in Civic Review, which is just our online program to submit the applications and all of the requested documentation. The planning staff then takes those applications and reviews for completeness. We have a very thorough list of all the information that is required in a preliminary plan. And so our planning staff takes all that, makes sure that we have everything, determines if the application is complete. From that point, the applicant is notified that it is complete or what they're missing when the application is complete and the fees are paid. We then move it on to our development review committee, along with all the documents. And the development review committee consists of our fire, our power, engineering, public safety, roads, everyone in every department in the city, including our legal and our planning and our building and grounds that come, and they will make any comments on the plans to make sure that they comply with their specific regulations and their specific requirements for what their infrastructure needs are. And they will review, they do what we call redlining it, where they will go through and make all of their statements. The legislation now requires, and we typically already have been doing this, and so it's not a big stretch for us, but we need to quote either the section of our code or the specific specification that has been adopted in the city that relates to the changes or the adjustments that we need made on those reviews. Then those reviews are all pulled in together. The DRC community meets together, goes over everything, makes any other little notes that may have been missed, and those red lines are sent back to the applicant to be addressed. This is the section where this new legislation has the biggest impact, whereas before we would go on, some cities, we didn't, we once again were very concise in our process, would just go back and forth in this process ad nauseum. We're now limited. In the preliminary, according to the attorneys from the league and who have been advising, the preliminary does not have a number of reviews that they are limited to, that the 4 reviews that we are limited to by state legislation applies to the final. Typically, we have not had an issue with that. Our DRC is a very thorough process. We make sure that we have the information that we need. However, now when we send them back to the applicant, if they do not address everything that we have put in that specific review, then that does not count as a full review cycle. If it does, if they respond to everything that we've asked them to, then that counts as one review cycle. And they send them back to us. They're once again sent to the members of DRC to make sure that everything has been addressed. And then each individual member will indicate whether or not their concerns have been addressed. If at the final we have not brought something up, unless it is a matter of health, safety, or federal or state law, we waive that. So if by some chance something has slipped by, which very rarely happens with us, we waive that right. And then and once the final approval has been given, the applicant is notified, and then they would move on. So we will get a preliminary, and they'll go through this process, and then we will get the final and go through the process again. We do take preliminary and final concurrently, and the word that we have gotten from the league is that when plans are submitted for concurrent, both with the preliminary and final are submitted for concurrent review, that we are still limited to only 4 reviews. So we may be able to, we'll use 1 on our preliminary and 3 on final, or however, but we are still limited when they are done concurrently. And other than that, we do have 15 days in which to reply to an initial, to schedule this, a preliminary, and we have 20 days to respond to a final. And so that has been the timeframes that have been set by this legislation. And then the Administrative Land Use Authority, which will now be our staff, it will not be a matter of going through the Planning Commission or the City Council, will give final sign-off on the administrative review and do the administrative review of the plan. I know there was some concern that because these wouldn't come to you, that there would not be, you would not have the information about whatever subdivisions may be coming into the city. And we certainly want to avoid that. We want to make sure that you have the information that you need. So we will be providing a monthly report written document of those that are in the pipeline and how those are moving along. So this does not take effect until February 1st of 2024. And like I said, likely we will be seeing some tweaks to this legislation in the next session. So I may be back to you as of the end of the session, as of March 6th, to tell you what they decided we needed to fix. Are there any questions or any clarifications from Troy or anyone? I'm sure he's got some for me.
Yeah, I just was wondering why we're delaying implementation. Is there any reason to delay it that long?
Well, the only reason that we did is because we have not had a chance. In the code, we took out the list of all of the items that were required, and we have not had a chance to fully review those lists and get them in front of the council. John recommended that we have the council adopt those so that they have some weight to them. And then I put February 1st because that was the date that we were required to by the state. So it's totally up to whether the council wants to or not, but it gives us enough time to be able to get the other DRC members and to get our scheduling set. Typically, we have a set schedule for ours, and as a result, that may run into a glitch with the 15 days. And so we just want to be able to also have that time to make sure that we are able to get our DRCs scheduled and the other members of the DRC committee up to speed on the need that they will have to respond quickly.
So the reason we're amending our city code is simply to comply with the requirement from the state.
Correct.
We really don't have an option.
No, we don't.
We can't say, no, we're not going to do it.
No. And it's funny because they didn't really say what would happen if we didn't, but I don't ever
We just have we
Yeah,
just
I don't
we
ever
just have
trust
to
them.
we just have to create
Yeah.
the legislation to go into our code so it matches what the state requires us to do, basically, is what it is.
Yeah. I would take that risk with my parents at some times of not actually following through, but I don't know if I do that with the state legislature.
So, Carla, just this motion here that we have in front of us, this ordinance, are you wanting us to approve this tonight? Is this the one, are you wanting us to delay?
No, we would just delay implementation. So it would be approved tonight, but would not go in effect till February 1st.
Okay, got it.
But we would adopt it tonight so that we could just start moving and getting all of our committee members up to speed
Okay.
on all of it. And we did do one thing. We wanted to make sure, just to kind of protect ourselves, that we didn't have to go through the same with commercial because they can be, and we didn't want, and even though the state law makes it very clear that it is only for residential and applies only to does not apply to multifamily or condominium. We didn't want any developer to come in and say, well, you have to do this. So we actually added a whole commercial subdivision section as well that is not as strict as this one for residential.
Okay, other questions for Carla? It looks like I need to open this up for public comment. Is that correct, Kim? Okay, I'll open it up for public comment in relationship to this ordinance. Anyone like to address the council? Okay,
I'll move to close the public hearing.
have a motion.
I'll second.
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, I'll entertain a motion for approval then.
Make a motion to approve ordinance number 19-2023, amending Springville City Code Titles 11 and 14 to comply with requirements of SB 174, Local Land Use and Development Relationship Revisions, and HB 406, Local Land Use, Development and Management Act modifications.
Okay, I have a motion.
I'll second.
It's a roll call vote. Chris?
Yes.
Craig?
Yes.
Liz?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Jason?
Yes.
Okay, very good. There you go, Carla. Laura is not here, but Josh will be doing it. Hey, Josh, you're up.
Laura bribes me with Smarties and then gets me to come to the council.
That's all it takes.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. The amendments you have before you tonight regarding parking can really be broken into two categories, and they have the two different categories really have genesis in two different places. The procedural amendments is something that Laura has had on her plate for a long time that she's wanted to do to just deal with elements in the code that needed to be updated. And those include typographic issues, things like changing nomenclature and other phrasing to be consistent with current state law, and to address unclear language, and even to reorder the table, the required off-street parking table. It was not alphabetical, so despite how many times I've looked at it, I always had a hard time finding the categories I wanted, so now that's alphabetical. And you can see all those reflected in your copy of the ordinance. We've also moved administrative approvals from the Planning Commission to staff, similarly to what we have done in Title 14 with the subdivision review process or subdivision approval process. And this is really, again, to streamline the process, to bring things that really are objective and administrative to the staff level, and get them kind of out of the public forum. And then also there's a little procedural amendment in there that allows tandem parking, not just in the category that it's listed, but to add that it can be approved in traditional neighborhood development or other overlays. Currently, the Lakeside overlay specifically allows tandem parking in some situations. And while it can do that as a kind of a standalone district, we just wanted to make it clear in the parking title that that was internally consistent. So those are the amendments to the code that are typographic or deal with the way that we handle procedures, but really don't change any regulatory aspects of the code.
What are the, go back to that, will you? So what's an administrative approval? So we're moving that from Planning Commission to staff. Give me an example of what an administrative approval might be.
So an administrative approval would be, right now we've got the Art City Auto Body that we did the rezone with in the spring. They're about ready, they're about done with DRC, and because it's under a certain size, based per our code, it doesn't have to go to the Planning Commission. So an administrative approval is simply an approval where somebody has a right to do something, they're following the code, they make an application, and the limit of our review is just, does the application meet the code or not? And if it meets the code, we have to approve it. So that just moving that administrative approval, that's the same criteria the Planning Commission has. We're just moving that last step of the process from the Planning Commission to staff.
Is that to help expedite the process?
It helps expedite the process. It helps simplify meeting calendars. It helps separate administrative from legislative items. Often when these type of items come to council, come to Planning Commission, people come with the understanding that they can comment and that their comments will be considered. But in this case, for administrative approvals, public clamor can't be considered. It has to be some substantial evidence that the proposal doesn't meet the code.
Okay.
And so taking those out of that forum where it can lead to frustration and misunderstanding is something that across the state we've been trying to do a better job of in the past couple of years.
So Josh, do you also retain the right to waive a certain level of parking and to allow them to reduce the parking without going to Planning Commission?
So one of those administrative approvals, and we'll talk a little bit more in the next category, is the approval for a parking reduction. Right now, that parking reduction request goes to Planning Commission as part of the site plan approval, and right now that requires Planning Commission action. Under this ordinance, that is given specific criteria, where right now it doesn't have really great criteria. It is kind of vague, and as John would say, we really need objective criteria to determine whether they meet the code or not. So we're adding some objective criteria to that, and then moving that existing administrative review from Planning Commission to staff.
So does the Planning Commission have the right to be able to waive or to change the parking without coming to City Council?
Not beyond that which is provided in the ordinance.
Which
So,
is 25%.
would be 25% if this is adopted. So if somebody came in and said, hey, I don't want to do parking, or I want my parking aisles to be 20 feet wide instead of 24 or 26 feet wide, that's a change to the code. That's not an exception or something that is or in the code as something that they can come and get a change to or get relief from. So that would have to come to the Planning Commission, have to come to the City Council, any change to the code. But as long as they met the criteria and they weren't requesting more than 25%, if this code was adopted, then they could have that approved by staff. But anything else beyond that would be a change to the code and would have to go through the legislative process.
But
Staff can still say no. Right?
Staff can say no if they don't meet the criteria.
So I
They
mean, just
can
to
or they will, or it's their choice, your choice.
No, if they don't meet, they don't get approved.
Yeah.
It's not discretionary
But
one
if,
way or the
if
other.
they were required to have 4 and they asked for 3, you could say no, but you could also say yes, right?
I couldn't say no if they met the criteria.
Oh, really? So that you could, even though the code required 4, you could say, okay, you only need 3 because
Right,
you
because
asked
this reduction says if you
Oh.
meet these criteria,
those criteria.
One-
and
one
then-
of-
That's in the new ordinance,
new
not
ordinance.
in the current ordinance.
and that's
correct?
one problem with the current ordinance is it is very vague in the current ordinance. So it's almost like the Planning Commission could say, well, we don't like this, but if you give us a little something over here, or we can, it makes it unpredictable and arbitrary and capricious potentially.
If we don't have specific requirements of why somebody gets to do something and somebody can't, then really we should let everybody do whatever the ordinance allows that's in their favor. And the reason being is because we can't say A is different than B, because we got to look at the rule. But if there's a reason why A is B underneath the rule, then we can then say, okay, we're going to let B, but not A.
But we're really talking about two separate things. We're talking about number one, making the code or the exception standard, whether the Planning Commission or staff approves
Exactly.
it. The second thing that we're doing is we're acquiescing the power of the Planning Commission to staff to approve it. So there's two things we're looking at here, not just
Yeah.
one thing.
And it's not really the power of the Planning Commission, because the Planning Commission really, when it comes to applying the ordinance or doing an administrative approval, doesn't necessarily have power. They're just the last body that says this does meet the code. So now we're just saying they're not going to be the last body. It would be staff that would do that. So it's not really a power because it's not legislative. So if it's a legislative thing, for instance, he mentioned our city auto body, that went through a rezone. Now that's where kind of the governmental power happens, because then the Planning Commission makes a recommendation and this body approves it legislatively.
I guess the thing that I'm always struggling with, and I talked with you about this, is if it was just the parking requirement, I would say staff can do that, but we're talking about a change to it, reducing it by 25%. You know, to let that staff do it, that's the question on the table, is whether staff should have that right or power or whatever you
But
want to
in
call it.
reality, though, it's no longer the right to make the reduction, because the reduction is based upon criteria that's already in the ordinance. And so it's not like Josh or whoever or the Planning Commission can now say, hey, we're going to allow, instead of 4, 3. The only way they can reduce it is if they make or meet certain criteria.
But
that's
if we
in-
have no criteria, they have to do 4.
Exactly. And that's how it should be, because if we don't have criteria, then everybody should be able to only do 3, because we shouldn't be able to say, hey, you know, Josh's development's different than my development type of a thing. If he comes in and asks for 3 and I ask for 3, you should give it to both of us.
No, you don't understand. If your ordinance says everybody has 4 and there's no criteria for getting 3,
There's no reduction.
or
Yeah.
reduction to 25, everybody has to do 4.
Correct.
Everybody has to do 4. But if there's a reduction and we don't have criteria of what to meet on that reduction, everybody should get 3.
Correct.
Now, if there's criteria and they meet the criteria, then you should get 3 based upon the criteria.
And we're saying we don't have criteria. My point is we need to have criteria, and I just soon leave it with the Planning Commission with the criteria. But that's just me.
Yeah. Well, that's why it's here before you.
And is this criteria already lined up? Do we know what that is?
Yeah, it's in your.
I didn't see it, so.
Yeah, in the
Yes, I think that's so we can make a decision. Let's back up and say what is the criteria
Yeah,
specifically to parking, because I think that's where
yeah,
the
the
heartburn
criteria
is.
for so it's 11.6.113 to no 11.6.113 sub 5 reduction in parking standards. So it's in the on the fourth page of the amendments underneath the parking space dimension table.
So what's the coded number again?
Uh,
11 what? Because our
11
numbers on our paper,
So it's 11.6.113 subsection 5, and then A. So right now it reads, an applicant may apply to the planning commission for a reduction in the amount of parking spaces. The applicant must clearly demonstrate that the required number of parking stalls is unnecessary for the proposed use and any possible future use of the building. So that's really kind of subjective. So what we are proposing is changing that to the parking requirements may be reduced from the minimum standards when the land use authority determines that the reduction meets the intent of this chapter. Any reductions shall be based on the following criteria: the intensity of the proposed use, the hours of operation, whether there is shared parking, trip generation, and peak demands. So those are your 5 criteria. And then any request that lowers the amount of stalls by more than 25% shall not be approved.
So which kind of makes sense. So if they said, hey, look, we're only parking at this time of day, that's the criteria, then they could.
Right, or this is, we have a parking demand study from a transportation engineer that says this. Or we have a shared parking agreement with the person adjacent to us, and we believe that the combined demand between those two has peaks that don't overlap.
Sure.
All of those are potential ways to meet those criteria.
Yeah. Other comments, questions about
And
this?
so you're saying you're saying that this ordinance will allow staff to make that determination rather than the planning commission?
Correct.
But it's the criteria that makes the determination. It's not a people thing. I
Right.
mean, AI could do it. AI, I mean, because it is pretty
Yeah,
specific.
let me rephrase
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
So staff has the ability
Yeah.
to do that based on those criteria.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Whereas if you were to make a motion to keep that administrative approval at the planning commission but adopt the criteria, then I would write a staff report and analyze the applicant's conformance with those criteria
Correct.
and make a recommendation to the planning commission.
Right.
Then they would discuss and make a motion.
And they would be the reviewer instead of, is it the DRC you were talking about?
Well, they wouldn't be the reviewer. No, all that review would happen in the DRC and at a staff level, and then we would make a recommendation to the planning commission, and they would simply evaluate
Like they do subdivisions now.
right. They would evaluate the project and say, looks like this meets all the requirements, thus we must say yes. Or staff, it looks like they missed something. Can you show us that they really did meet this requirement?
Right, right.
Josh, you used the example of 4 to 3, but that's not solid, is it? They could request 4 to 2.
No,
They can't?
any reduction that requests, and any request that reduces the amount of parking by more than 25% shall not be approved. That's a bright line.
Okay,
I-
that's kind of one part of it. That's one piece of this. And again, my pitch on the planning commission is just to give more eyes on looking and making sure that things get done. And that's not out of distrust with you. And, you know, if the council wants to do it by staff, that's perfectly okay with me. So, but I mean, that's the reason why I think the planning commission, and I'd like them to still be involved in it, but that's just my personal preference. So that's not because I distrust you, Josh.
I like it when the planning commission gets to do subjective things, when they're allowed to do subjective things, but I don't like it when they're doing objective, meaning criteria based, but the audience thinks that it's subjective. So by the time it hits that point, people are coming here thinking that they can change the planning commission's stance on things, and they can't because it's administrative, not legislative. And most of what we ask our planning commission and even us as council is to create legislative issues, not administrative.
You know,
and when
that's
we have
actually true.
administrative
Yeah.
stuff comes to here, everybody gets heated, and we really can't change the. It's even like this couple that was here earlier today. it is what it is. If you're going to make a subdivision, you have to put the utilities to it. Sorry, that's the law. That's what we have set as council or planning commissions, is that, yeah, you make a subdivision, you have to put utilities to it. Now, you can ask for variances and you can bounce around, but really, that once it hits here, we can't do anything about that.
You know, there's a lot of truth to that. Maybe I'll even retract my about the planning commission, because that's really a true statement. And I think that the objective of the state's what they're trying to do is make it so that people don't come to a meeting thinking that they can change something,
But-
when in fact that they really
But
can't.
if there is
So-
a problem, and if we do have parking problems, then we can address it in a legislative group and say, look, guys, we got a problem with parking. They're all over the place. Can we change this?
Are we
so that
thinking
they
right,
can't
Troy?
approve it?
No, I think you're thinking right along. I guess I look at those standards and wonder how that is. I mean, on a subdivision or the utilities you're talking about, our code says you have to have an 8-inch water line in front of your house to subdivide.
Yeah.
So that's a specific requirement that you either have or don't have, but that's I don't see that here.
I tend to agree with Troy, because we're talking about objective versus subjective.
Yeah, and that might not be a kind of, but that was kind of because it was
Well,
there earlier today. So it's a
But
little
some of
bit
these
different.
criteria, as Troy is starting to talk, are subjective. I mean, and so we might want to, if you want us to get to objective criteria, maybe we ought to, continue this, come back, and just to give you, for instance, I mean, what does it mean to have a shared parking agreement? What does that mean? Does it mean that you have a shared parking agreement, so if you need one more, you have one more, stall on somebody else's property? And that, to me, would be more objective than just saying you have a shared parking agreement. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so I think you could really make these a lot more objective than what they sound, because right now they could be a little bit subjective. So I would suggest, if you want to get down to really objective, maybe
Make it
continuing
objective.
this, come
Yeah.
back with these, and make them very subjective.
specifically objective.
Yes,
that gives
so
them
then there's no
numerical
question.
values.
Either, as Troy mentions, either it's an 8-inch line or it's not an 8-inch line type of a thing. So,
There's a lot of truth to that. Jason, Chris, Liz, thoughts?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I agree with making clear rules is what you're doing, what we're doing, right?
Yep.
And just making it clear, and because I don't think we need to, I think we need to give the staff the ability to make decisions without and also, so that the builder can understand what is expected of them, and especially before they get too far along in the process. And then right up front, they can, if they feel like they want to change it, then they go through the proper channels of the planning commission and come to us or whatever they need to do. But yeah, I like clear direction and rules. I think that's appropriate.
Okay,
I just,
you don't have to make a comment if you
no,
don't
I
want
just,
to.
my
but-
old comment, it's always been, everybody knows it, is that I think we sell ourselves short on parking every time we do almost anything. We've had this conversation a million times, and this seems to be the one thing we're addressing here is parking, which to me, we always think that that's just so expendable. And I know that's why I think if you're gonna do it, you've gotta have some really good criteria, because almost everything I've seen since I've been here this last 2-year term, everything's asked for reduced parking. Every one of them. It's every time. It's not just an occasional thing. It's every time, because it financially works better for them to have less parking.
Correct.
And I don't think there's any other reason than that. Maybe to make it work, I get that, but it's comes down to finances, and that's a very legitimate reason, and we don't want to be seen as unfriendly, but I think we need to be a little bit careful to not make it so that every single time somebody comes in, which it would have been so far in these developments that I've seen anyway, you're going to be looking to change it. I think it needs to be. I think we need to prop up a little bit more on the front side of it than all this talk about the back side of it. That's my personal opinion. And I think we should not be unfriendly towards developers. That's what it sounds like, but that's not my intent. My intent is to provide our city with enough parking so that we're not crowding everybody on the streets every time something happens. That's my feeling.
Would you like me to?
You want to
continue
shift
the-
into second part?
Yeah.
And that ties in with what Chris just
Yeah,
talked
so
about.
the couple regulatory amendments. The first is, as we discussed, an increase in the maximum reduction from 20 to 25%. And then the second is the big change here, and this is where we're responding to comments and requests that were made to you back in May, primarily by Cherie Kilpack, who's here with us tonight, and also related to the parks that are working on the bike shop at 300 North, on the northeast corner of 300 North and Main Street. But the parks were more concerned about the improvements to the right-of-way and how that affected parking in the right-of-way. And Cherie was more concerned about the impact to her site that would result from having to meet the parking requirement for commercial use. So most historic buildings in downtown are non-compliant for parking. A few of the buildings I looked at today, if we had a restaurant that wanted to come in and go in the old Herald building, they couldn't. If we had a retailer that wanted to come and go in the Charisma Dance Studio, they couldn't. If we had a restaurant that wanted to go in the Warrior Way, they wouldn't be allowed to do that either. They don't have enough parking. Or a retailer in the where Jive was, and now it's going to dog grooming. That also would exceed the parking requirement. So either you would have to continue your existing use or find one that meets the amount of parking you have. So for example, the old, the Packard store, we have the owner here of that tonight. That building is also limited as to what uses it can have because of the amount of parking that it has in it. So we're proposing to look at the area from basically one block either side of Main Street in the historic downtown area and exempting that area from the requirement to provide additional parking when you change a use to a use that requires more parking. So if you went in the case of the Reynolds home, if we took the square footage of that home, it's quite large, and applied that to like a professional office or a gathering type use, we'd essentially have to take out the whole garden plot on the back of the property and make that a parking lot to be able to accommodate that. And especially considering the goals of the Reframing Downtown plan to allow incremental changes in uses and lower the barriers to entry for people to be able to make investments in revitalizing our downtown, or not revitalizing, but increasing the vitality of our downtown. This is one thing we can easily do that really opens the door. For me, it's a really an easy first step that we can do before the comprehensive parking study, because it doesn't necessarily have a huge amount of downside. From my perspective, if I had a problem downtown and it was parking, I would be happy about that problem. There's a lot of other problems I wouldn't be happy about, and the reasons are because, one, if we had a parking problem, that means a lot of people are down here and they want to be down here. I haven't been to many of the best places I've ever been in the world, which is not a lot compared to most of you, I think, but that parking is cheap and easy or free. And second, that we have other tools that we can put in place to deal with and manage parking demand that are no less effective in a reactionary state than beforehand. And then kind of a free market thought that if we allow the real estate market to fill those spaces with the things that the market says should go there based on who can pay and who wants to be there, not constrained by the parking requirements, then we really get a much more accurate understanding of what the unrestrained parking demand is downtown and can better respond through a comprehensive parking analysis and study with regulatory management and even city investments in parking to deal with that. And if we know without any other restraints how much parking based on the uses that really want to be here, that would help us make an even better decision as we review the long-term strategy for the city's involvement in managing and facilitating parking downtown. So those are the two regulatory amendments. No, go ahead, Liz. That's all I have.
Okay, so how would that affect existing businesses? Would they be able to change their parking percentage? requirement? The existing businesses that have built
So
more parking, like
I guess-
not the stage and time.
So no, it wouldn't allow you to build more space and take parking you already have. But it would allow you to change the use of the existing space into something that required more parking without providing the more parking. So like Charisma couldn't add on space and say, well, we don't have to provide more parking,
Okay,
but they could change from a dance studio to
a restaurant or something.
To a clothing store.
to a clothes. Was that what was
Okay.
Uh-huh.
So to a clothing store and be able to do that. Right now they couldn't because they don't meet the parking requirement for that use.
So basically downtown, there wouldn't be any parking restriction at all.
For existing buildings.
For a new move-in, there'd be no restriction.
For a new move-in, correct. If there was any new development or expansion, they would still have to meet the parking code. So this wouldn't apply to the Allens block. This wouldn't apply to somebody coming in and filling in the gap between the Napa and the Charisma dance studio. But it would apply to changes of use in those existing buildings or
So-
reuse of those buildings.
So from a practical standpoint, let's say a clothing store moved into Charisma. Where do the patrons come from? Where do the
What's their market area?
Well, yeah, but where do they come from and how do they get there?
I think they park in Snelson's parking and walk.
Yes, yeah, they do.
Well,
And I've got a couple of examples of that too. But so I guess my real question is the intention to get people to walk there, to come some other way besides car?
not necessarily, no.
And then where do they put their car when they go to that store? Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not necessarily against or in favor of what you're proposing. I'm just trying to get some clarification about how people get there, what they do with whatever vehicle it might be, a bike, a scooter, a car, whatever it is, to patronize that business. Whether it's Charisma or a dance studio or a photo lab, it doesn't matter. Where are the people going to put their vehicle while they're shopping?
So first, any business would be coming into that situation with a full understanding of what parking was there and kind of the environment. So we wouldn't be handicapping anyone that wanted to be in an area that had more parking. But second, we have really abundant parking throughout the downtown area right now, except for a couple hot spots where it's more busy, but there's still generally a space available. Between the Civic Center, all the on-street parking for 4 or 5 blocks from 4th to Center and beyond, and side streets like 2nd and 1st and 3rd. There's really a lot of parking in the area. And
There is?
There is.
Have you been down around Second South and Main and around Maggleby's and UPS and the bank and
I don't do it a lot, but I've never not been able to find a spot within a block.
And at UPS, you guys, I think Central Bank says for Central Bank only, right? So if you own parking, you do that. That's what I
Right,
do.
off street.
But your point is well taken, because second is it's probably one of the best kept secrets if you want to go to the UPS store, because who can't get a parking spot when they need to go to the UPS store? It's bad, right?
Yeah.
But we still go there. Now at some point, FedEx down at Walmart's getting busier, and UPS will probably fill that. So it's up to you as a business owner if you put a business there and you don't have parking and your business suffers. But kudos to you if you think you can make it without parking, because eventually if parking gets really bad, Mike's going to put a sticker up. This is, you park here and you're not my customer, you're towed, right? But Second has a lot, and this is where I started. Like, oh, hey, Second is a great secret. But if you go up to where the old U.S. West building and all that is, there's a lot of parking there, and it's pretty quick to get to the UPS store. There's a light there, and off you go. If we do what we're doing, which is parallel park, or not parallel, excuse me, what do you call that? Where you angled parking. If we do that on those big freaking wide streets that we don't know what to do with, we got oodles of parking for our downtown, and it's a lot better than going downtown. I mean, I ride the train because I hate parking in downtown, but I still go downtown. I don't think we need to have a train come to Springville yet, but there's there's plenty of parking, especially if businesses are crazy enough to open, and I shouldn't say crazy, but willing to open in our city and revitalize our downtown. Because you're right, they're going to sit vacant. I don't know that anybody's going to come if we laden them with huge parking requirements.
That's another thought, that on one hand, there are hypothetical situations where we have a lot of parking demand and we have to deal with it. And so potential future downsides. But we know that there are at least a handful, two that are here, or I guess two that are here tonight that would like to do things with existing buildings, some of which have been commercial in the past, some of which haven't, and feel confident that they can make a good run out of it without providing additional off-street parking. And I'd much rather deal with the negative externalities of that if parking demand creeps into a neighborhood or something else than stop that from happening up front by imposing a parking restriction. But that's a philosophical position that I think is not entirely objective.
Yeah, that's subjective that should be here, and we have to make a decision.
So back to my question, then if we take a look at Cherie's proposed development that she wants to do there, and we don't make her put parking back there in the garden because she wants to use the garden for the reception center. So then the idea would be that her patrons would park wherever downtown space they can find, whether it's on Second, whether it's in my parking lot, whether it's in the church, whether it's parallel parking on the street, and then walk to her venue. Is that the idea? Is that
just like Art City Days? The time we have the most people downtown is the time we have the least amount of parking downtown, and it somehow works. I don't think we would want every day to be Art City Days, but maybe we would.
But if it was, then it would be cost effective to build a parking structure.
Right, or we'd know what areas needed residential parking permits or other type of.
So have you talked to your businesses during Art City Days and some of the parking hassles? I'm trying to be cold water on it, or even try to change this conversation, but all of what you're talking about is there's some truth to that, but there's also the truth that during Art City Days there's a lot of clenched teeth. You go talk to Magaby's, how they feel about all the parking that goes on, and some of the other places. I know Central Bank. I mean, it's just notoriously bad, and you have to be a Nazi out there in order to keep people out of your parking lot. So your customers, and we have customers who absolutely will not come during Art City Days, and so. When you say, well, it solves itself, yeah, it solves itself, but there's a great deal of backlash to it, and I just I'm just concerned about opening this up. I want to encourage businesses, but to open this up in the way that you're opening it up, I think it's a lot, if you will, and saying, well, we'll just deal with it if there are problems. I don't know that I would approach it that way. I don't know that we as a city administrator should be approaching problems by saying, well, if there's a problem, we'll deal with it later. I think that's our responsibility, is to legislate and to do the things that we think are in the best interest of the city. And whether it's this or it's something else, I think we just need to be thinking about what repercussions or problems there are. And we're just notoriously a society of people who drive cars. We just drive cars. We drive cars to work when we should be walking or riding our bikes to work. It's just the way we're wired. And we have climate and those kinds of things. So I'm just a little bit concerned about jumping into this, not to discourage a business, but I think there's workarounds that we need to look at. But to do this for the whole downtown, I think it's a lot. I think it's a big step in a direction that you just don't know what the downside risk is. And maybe I'm totally wrong.
Well, sorry. I do know that I have been down to the UPS store like last week, and I totally missed an opportunity because I forgot my package. But there was a parking spot right in front. I could have pulled in. It was all great, and I missed it. And then I know that yesterday I went to Central Bank, and there wasn't a parking, so I drove around the block, and I came back, and there was a parking. So sometimes people are willing to just we understand that we have to wait a little bit, or we might drive somewhere, or I could have maybe parked at Vaught Hanks and then walked across the street too. So there's other options, and if there was a great, Maggleby's is great, and I'll go maybe park somewhere else and go eat at Maggleby's. So depending on what I want to do, I might look a little bit further for a parking lot. And even I know that Art City Days is not all of the time. I know it's annoying for businesses when it is, but maybe people are looking at the businesses and going in. I mean, maybe they're going and getting a sandwich at Maggleby's, probably not. If they're going to Carnival, maybe not that. But they're probably having scones, but anyway.
So let me address that, because I've been dealing with Art City Days for 40 years. I've been in that building for 40 years. Not one person that comes to Art City Days walks in my building and spends money.
Yeah. So it
So
but it
that's,
takes your...
yeah, that's probably not a
Probably
good
not
example.
Well,
Yeah.
I just
For your
wondered if it might. Well, probably not, but is it, so it's, I know it's a sacrifice. Is it a huge, like, is
No,
it
no.
a huge sacrifice?
No,
Our City Days?
yeah, we're talking about two different
as
deals,
far as-
because
well, I mean, as far
I put
as
I put a
people-
sign
yeah,
out that
I
says
see.
you can't park here
Yeah.
until 5 o'clock, and then I
Yeah.
take the sign down and it fills up in 2
Yeah.
seconds. So I mean, people are respectful
Yeah.
of the parking. They certainly are, but it has been a hassle for me. The best day of my life, other than when I got married, was when the fire department put the building there, so the carnival wouldn't be in the street in front of my building.
Yeah.
But that aside, I mean, parking is an issue, regardless of how much we have.
Well,
People have to
maybe-
park somewhere and walk to where they're going, which is fine. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
like I say, I'm not opposed or in favor of, or one way or the other. I'm just trying to wrap my head around how these businesses are going to get their patrons into their business
Could I jump
without
in?
parking.
Because I have a question for Josh that goes to that, and you're not proposing a change to this, but I just look at your subsection B, where you're transitioning this from Planning Commission to Land Use Authority, B sub 2, a reduction in parking will not cause a shortage for other uses located in the area. And I'm just not seeing if you want to put a restaurant in Warrior Way, I mean, I look at that much like the variance language that deals with economic benefit, that kind of almost automatically every time eliminates your ability to consider it. And it seems to be the kind of the same thing here, that any reduction in parking is going to cause a shortage for somebody else. So how are you ever going to be able to approve a reduction?
Under the reduction,
Yeah, under the reduction language, because you are going to have to make a finding that it will not cause a shortage for other uses located in the area.
that's a good question. I think in some cases you can say the parking demand based on similar uses and based on a parking demand study or parking trip generation study from a transportation consultant tells us objectively that they really don't need as much parking as we're telling them they need. And in a lot of cases, I think that's true. Like, I think if Mike came to me and said, I really don't need all that parking, I'd probably say, I think there's a way for that to be pretty objectively concluded, but it does limit our ability to say people will deal, because the people will deal assume or relies on the fact that on-street parking and parking at the Civic Center, other things, that is eventually a zero-sum number. So if we're saying it's full and adding some more demand is going to impact somebody else, but until we get to the point where there really is 95% parking occupancy most of the time, I would say that it's not necessarily a zero-sum game.
But that's kind of what Councilman Snelson is asking, at least from what I'm hearing, which is, I mean, where's the objective criteria for that? Is it 95% within 100 feet, within 1,000 feet? And at what time of day, and all of those other questions, and that's not in there. It's just, it doesn't cause a shortage.
I agree that the criteria listed under the parking reduction section could be greatly improved. I don't want to conflate that with the exemption from the change of use element, but I do agree that those criteria could use a lot of work.
And that goes back to where the mayor's saying, right? I mean, the objective criteria part of that, are you going to leave that with the planning commission or move it to staff? Because to me, I don't read that and see administrative very well, which is problematic because it should be, in any case, the reduction should be objective and administrative. So, I mean, it's the same problem we had with the earlier section from my perspective.
Well, if I understood it, the way I read it is we were just going to basically exempt downtown, right? It wasn't going to be if you meet these criteria or not.
Or changing your use.
Yeah.
So if somebody came in to build a new building or add on to their building,
Then
they'd
they'd
have to
go
meet.
with current.
But if somebody wanted to come in and put a retail store in the Herald building, they wouldn't have to meet the required. Basically, they could do any use in the zone that's permitted in the zone with the parking they have today, instead of being
If it's in
limited.
an existing building, because what that does is that keeps our downtown buildings with people in them.
Right.
Because otherwise, if they come in, they're not. You can't go into Charisma Dance Studio with anything because you've only got 2 parking spots. I mean, you'd be lucky to build a house there.
Right. And if the market got to the point where people wanted to be down here to the point where they say, I'm going to figure out a way to provide the parking, it inevitably will take something else out.
Correct.
So if you're going to put something really fun in Charisma, are you going to buy the lot next to it and turn it into a parking lot, or would you be
Is that
better
what we want?
served by having another destination there and dealing with parking more strategically? That's one of the catches about minimum off-street parking requirements, is that it tends to push destinations farther apart and actually reinforce driving. It's not necessarily that we're programmed to drive and park, that it's inevitable or it's ingrained, but it's that we've created a urban form and a built environment that reinforces and provides incentives, and as logical, rational people will respond to incentives.
Like when you go to an outlet mall and you drive from store to store
Right, because you can.
instead of walk.
But when you go to Park City Main Street, you park on whatever the alley is and you walk.
You walk the whole way.
You walk the whole way. And interestingly, across the country, studies have shown that one of the biggest determinants in how people, especially for commuting behavior, commute to a certain area, what the mode is, whether it's walk, transit, bike, single, driving a car, is the availability and the cost of parking. So we've learned that if you make it readily available and you make it cheap, people will use it. And if you make it less available and more expensive, Adam Smith tells you that the demand's going to go down a little bit. And as long as we watch that and manage that, we don't want to kill our downtown by not having parking being a positive experience, but we also don't want to go the other way. So it is definitely balanced.
Josh, I'm trying to see where you're limiting that to use. It just says in the downtown area you have the ability to reduce it based upon 3 criteria.
5? No, sorry.
It's 5
No.
A and then B.
No, it's actually not. No. That it is 2E, change of use. Right now it reads, whenever the use of any building is changed, the new use shall not be permitted, and a business license shall not be issued until and unless the premises comply with the requirements contained herein. And then we added the amendment, this requirement shall not apply to the historic downtown area from 400 south to 400 north and from 100 west to 100 east.
Right, but when you get to 5, your historic downtown area parking reduction applies anyway. So if I come build an addition to the building, can't I use section 5B?
You could use that reduction section, yes, but we're not just flat giving you a by right exemption from meeting the parking, but you could get a 25% reduction for that new parking demand that your addition created.
I guess I'm a little lost in following the logic.
Well, just give us an example.
so
If you're
Cherie-
Sherry and you just go into a building, it's just like,
If
what,
you're
I'm going to an
Cherie, you go in
existing
and
building. It's
You change the use of the existing
Yeah.
building, you don't have to
I don't
provide
worry about
additional
it.
parking.
But
for
if I
me.
tear down Gandolfo's and I build something,
Or
I can
if-
get a 25%.
Right, or if Cherie builds another building in the garden,
Yeah.
she's got to meet provide parking for that
She can
building.
ask for 25,
and she
but
can
she doesn't
ask
get
for
the carte
25%.
blanche.
But because it's not an existing building,
She still has to provide parking for that new building.
correct?
At a 25% reduction if she
If
asks for
she
it and
meets
it
the
meets the
criteria.
criteria.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going around and around. Chris, you've been quiet. I'll start down here and go right through.
Well, I guess if I thought we could clarify it and make it Josh's job and the administrative people a little bit more clear cut, then I would be in favor of that. I don't know if when Josh was saying he agrees that there could be some more objective thought put into the things, then I would say, let's give that a chance. And I don't want to run away businesses because we're going to kill it faster with no businesses than with no parking. I agree with that. You can't argue that. But I think we owe it to take, if it takes another couple of weeks or something, I don't know that a lot of constructions, I don't know. I don't know what the impending problem is for a developer right now. I don't know how bad that is to wait and see. But I think if we can give you tools that make your job a little bit easier, then I would be in favor of that.
And anticipating that, I did draft some alternative ordinances. One that just takes this, that piece, that change of use element and just isolates it, and then one that does everything else. So if you had an interest in moving one part ahead and not another one, you could do that. But I'm also perfectly happy to go do some more work and bring it all back together.
Okay, Michael?
Well, the only way we're going to get businesses downtown is if people are downtown. And so it's how we get people downtown. Is that driving, biking, walking, whatever it is? A business isn't going to locate downtown unless there's people here. So whatever we have to do to get people here is what I'm in favor of. Does that mean putting parking everywhere? I agree with Craig. I don't think so. Does that mean working with some of the businesses that are downtown to provide some sort of additional parking, if it's after hours or shared parking or whatever it might be? I'm okay with whatever it is that brings people downtown.
A bigger UPS store.
Whatever it is. I want to see, the only way reframing downtown is going to work, the only way revitalizing downtown is going to work is if there's people here. Now, the Allens Block will help with that because that will have people living there. So whatever we need to do to make sure that people are downtown is what I want to have happen. If you can figure out how to make that work, I'm on board.
Okay, Jason?
And not to sideline it, but that was my question too with the Allens Block. Once that gets developed, I mean, all the parking for the residents will be on the interior of that, right? But what about people visiting? And that's all going to be off-site, or is there going to be any space there for people that would be visiting residents of that area?
So all the townhomes would have. Well, I could go over the exact ratios,
Yeah,
but
sorry, I'm not looking for
what the applicant is proposing, or what they're predicting in terms of their parking demand, would still provide some visitor parking on site. It doesn't provide 2.25 for every unit all of the time, but it does evaluate peaks between different commercial and retail uses and the residential uses. All of the single-family units on the block have their own parking in a garage, and by reducing the number of totally lost my train of thought. But yes, we do anticipate that there will be parking available on site. Will everybody that visits that site at any time be able to find a space on site? No, I wouldn't make that argument.
Well, you're going to have the street level businesses too.
Right, and
So
we've
they're gonna-
accounted for them as well in that calculation.
Okay. Well, I mean, it sounds like, I like the element where it says you can change the use and not, but it sounds like I'm not trying to speak for the group, but it seems like people are going to want to have the two pieces together. And so I would think it'd be more work on your part, coming back with more objective criterion on the one portion, and then maybe developing this out a little further.
Okay, Craig?
I think there's two things we're talking about. There's the one for development, right? And I think there we just need to set clear objectives for the criteria because it is a little bit vague, right? So if we have clear objectives for the 25% reduction, let's let administration make that decision once it's clear. Because if it gets subjective, slippery slope. But when it comes to downtown, cut it loose. Cut it loose. Let downtown get some people. And I know it might be cliche. You know, let's treat the problem when we get it. Because right now we're so worried about a problem that we only have at basically our city days and Christmas when you need to go to the UPS store. I mean, the rest of it you can walk. It's not that I love Maggleby's. I go there once a week, and sometimes I have to walk maybe 100 yards. Whoa. But we don't have a parking problem yet. And where these guys are asking, I mean, I can think of the parks and hers. There's no parking problem there. Let's let these people revitalize our downtown, get a business in those areas, because both hers and the Park Kids place, I would be shocked if we ended up with major parking problems in either one of those locations. What do you think? I mean, you know, how much does Griffin cause parking problems for you?
Well, other than his
personal
people
stuff.
Mowing my fence over, none.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean that's to me, parks is a whole different issue.
Yeah.
Because the discussion that we had with parks was we're going to let them go, get their business going, and when reframing downtown, all the criteria are available then and the requirements, then they have to put it in.
Yeah,
that's a whole.
kind of
That's
what we were there too. But if this goes, then his thing because isn't he inside the fourth or is he outside it?
No, he's
It's a
inside.
separate issue too. They also have to improve their frontage.
Yeah. There's some other stuff.
And
there,
that was
because
the
he's
big
got that whole
issue.
weird-
yeah, that's
But-
kind of different.
But in a way, this at least knocks one of his problems down, which
Yes.
is parking.
Right.
Now, I don't think we can fix the car home, because it's just outside. But even this could possibly fix it if we said, and we notch this out. You know what I'm talking about? Because that was an issue we had there was parking as well, right? I would be okay if we niched it up, or if we set up a second east in that location on Center Street.
Liz?
Well, I think we're talking about if we build it, as in parking, they will come, or if they come, then we will build the parking. And I think that we should have them come. And then if, like you say, we have property around, then build the parking. And I agree with Mike, and I agree with Craig, that we need to have clear parameters and then go with it. And then I would really love to have some business around and be business friendly. It would be so great. And I would even ride my bike. Maybe we just need to get some bicycle. How about bicycle parking? We're only talking about car
There you go,
parking.
Logan.
Let's do some bicycle parking.
Logan's nodding his head pretty hard back there.
Yeah, he's
Yeah. So well, how about requiring
Just do your
some
drive up.
bicycle? Yeah.
you just drive right on in and pick your wife up.
Yeah, if there are great places you could come and you could stay. That's the thing, is people will park a little further away if there's a couple things that they want to do while they're here that are entertaining.
You can go to the UPS stores, the
Yes.
Maggleby's, and
Yes.
the bank.
Yeah, right there.
Better take it.
You can go here and then you can go to, yeah.
Okay, well, I just conclude. It sounds like we're going to table this and we're going to go back for.
Can we do them separately, though? Can we do the downtown one, get that one out of the way?
Well,
and then
your
do-
ordinance isn't written up that
Oh, was
way.
it one ordinance?
Have you got
I
'em
did
separated?
write some
Separated them out.
Oh,
a separate ordinance that just does that existing use section.
oh, good. After we talked this afternoon. Good.
'Cause I'd be totally okay making a proposal or a motion that we approve the downtown one.
Yeah, I'm just going to make one statement.
Go.
It'll go against your motion.
That's totally okay.
You have to have a business in order to attract people. It's not the other way around. You can have all the people in the world down here, but if they have nothing to go to or do, you have to be able to have businesses. And businesses, if you go any other city, if you can't find parking and be able to do it appropriately, you just keep driving. And it happens all the time downtown with certain businesses. And so when you say we need to have people down here, no, you need the businesses first, and then the people will come. And so you have to make sure that you have to have housetops to support it, so people will come down. But it's not to have the people down. So I disagree with that. Now, you can do what you want here, but I just give you a little warning that, you're playing with the parking, and I think that there's probably a better middle ground than what you're going to propose, but go ahead, the floor's open for a motion.
Well, I think the business, I mean, to stand up for Mike, I think the businesses bring the people, because people, you're right, people aren't just going to show up. They'll show up for a business, and they do show up for Magway's. They show up for our city days. So I'm going to make a motion that we approve the downtown.
Just
Can I do
hold
that
on
or
a
no?
second,
You gotta
'cause
get it done right.
We gotta get it in front of you in writing.
Yeah.
In order to,
So-
and then you can make your motion.
Yeah.
So you have something drafted. And do you have copies or just the one copy? Yeah.
And Kim, do we have a number for this motion, or for this ordinance?
It can be the same
It'll
as.
be the same one
Well, it might be good.
it's not been approved.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we understand what one it is.
This one, fill it in there, yeah, 11/6/13.
No,
Oh,
use
20,
the
2023.
2023.
You guys okay? Will anybody second it if I motion? I'll just say it. I motion that we approve ordinance number 20-2023, amending Springville Code Title 11, Chapter 6, Section 113, off-street parking in the downtown area.
Okay, I have a motion on the floor. Second?
I'll second that.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. It's a roll call vote, correct? Okay. Liz?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Jason?
Yes.
Chris?
No.
Craig?
Yes.
Okay, it passes 4-2, or 4-1. Okay, Brandon, you're on.
Can I just throw in, it's not, I thought they should go hand in hand. We should do them both at the same time. That's why I voted no.
Okay. Sounds good. Brandon, you're up.
Just glad you stuck around.
We couldn't vote for it in that pre-meeting, otherwise you'd be gone.
Are we rehashing this out?
No. I don't
No.
think we need to.
No,
We got lots of questions.
we already hashed it out, I think.
Mine is just to say if there are any questions from earlier, so.
Are there any questions from earlier?
You got it.
Could you repeat the whole presentation?
Okay, any questions for Brandon?
No.
Okay, I'll open it for a motion then.
I'll make a motion to approve resolution number 2023-42, approving the South Utah Valley Power System Organization Agreement and authorizing Springville City's representative to the SUVPS Board of Directors to vote in favor of the organization agreement, bylaws, and member cost reallocation resolution.
Okay, I have a motion. Have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, it's a roll call vote. Jason?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Craig?
Yes.
Liz?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Okay, Jeff, you're on, buddy.
I
Your
make a
problem.
motion that we,
All right. This is just kind of a progression on 1200 West Phase 4. It's the MAG funding. It's the pioneering road that we've started out with and been awarded 4 phases thus far on 1200 West. Crucial north-south connection gives us an alternate to I-15. It will connect to 4 state routes ultimately when it's all finished. We have 3 previous phases which have been approved and funded through the TIP. This is a pioneering road cross-section. So you can see phase 1 completed in 2019. Phase 2 was the section down to Spanish Fork. Unfortunately, Tintic realignment, the Tintic Railroad realignment has delayed that one. So we have just received funding for phase 3, and we've gone out to bid. We just received bids on that. They came in considerably higher than original estimates when we received TIP funding. So we were working through that. This is really, tonight we're talking about is just getting a letter of or interlocal agreement together with Utah County that authorizes us to start expending funds for phase 4. Phase 4 is going from 550 north up to 1400 north.
including a crossing of Hobble Creek there. And that would link into Mountain Springs Parkway up into Provo. Really, this is what we're looking at, a half-road construction, and then once we get up into Mountain Springs Parkway, actually widening that section out to the full 5-lane section up to 1400 North. And so funding became available October of this year. Before we can do anything, and we do have a design consultant ready to award, we just need this interlocal agreement in place. Utah County has taken it before their board commission, and they have signed that. And that's where we are tonight. Any questions?
I do have a question.
Yes.
This may totally be irrelevant, but I was just trying to look at our master plan for the for our bicycle trails.
Mm-hmm.
Is that also included in that road, a bicycle trail?
1200 West does
1200
have
West.
a multi-use path on the west
Okay.
side from stem to stern. That
Okay.
comes in with development. This Pioneering Road doesn't even include the sidewalk. It's really just getting
It's
a
the
lane.
2-lane one.
Yeah, 2-lane and just
Right,
getting
'cause
it in. Yep.
okay. All right.
So on there, it shows the south piece, 23, 24, from basically that one right there, phase 3. Is that really going to happen by the end of 24, do you think?
Like I said, we just got bids
Yeah.
back from Center to 550 North. We've already gotten the property in place. We have to work with MAG on some funding and look at some value engineering to try to get those costs down. But we have a hard bid. We may have to go back out to bid.
So it's just from center. So it's basically
just from
through
center,
Conde.
so-
It's through Conde, so not popping out to Fourth yet.
We're not
Fourth
going out to
still
Fourth.
has some
We got some
property
drama.
acquisition
I know, I'm sorry.
issues that we're trying to work.
But we do. I mean, 1 to 10. What are the chances that we get it from center to pass through Conde's
by
end of 24? Yeah.
Oh, I'm very comfortable.
That's good. That's great. I got kids. We have kids that live in the West Fields. That'll be huge for them.
And we are working with Utah Power and Light to get a connection that crosses at 250 North, connecting basically the existing subdivisions to the new ones, and
Where the
not
little
having
dirt-
people kind of
The dirt road,
maverick
right there,
across
right
the
there
dirt
by
road,
yeah,
right? So
What is that?
question you asked and what you answered is the same. You asked whether we're going from Center Street to 4 South.
No. We clarified that we're not. I wished we were, but we are going to go from center, which is there. And you know where Mikhail Conde lives, and you go right down past Mikhail's place, and then you're like, oh, little dirt road it, and then you go again. That's going to get fixed.
that will be part of
And then
this.
it's going to hook on to 1250 and take us all the way over to where this little red thing is, which is 550.
Yep.
That's way cool. So past that church.
But yes, we're still have some property acquisitions that we're working on from the center to 4 South. But
Yeah, I knew that there was issues there, but that means that other piece will be done by a year from now. We'll be like driving on it.
But that's where also the engineering is on phase 2. That's where the lay of that road is going to go.
roughly, it's going to follow the power line corridor and then eventually pull west to tie into Canyon Creek Parkway. And Spanish Fork has called for a roundabout at that location for some odd, it's where Canyon Creek now peels off and goes towards the railroad tracks on there. We'll look at that, but yeah, until the Tintic is really finalized, we're focusing on the other.
Yeah, and the only reason I say that is I think that there was on that 1600 South study, you may just want to look at that road complexity and make sure that it lines up with what is being trying to be accomplished. Because there was a couple proposals, and we just want to make sure that the proposal, because we had a roundabout also up on that upper end that we needed to kind of take into consideration. So just look at that.
Okay,
So.
I'll double check.
Yeah, phase 2 doesn't even have a date because of the Tintic, because the Tintic doesn't have a date, correct?
Well, no, it has a date, but it's
Yeah.
down the road.
Well, is there really a date? I mean, they're saying 20, but then if it's more than 2 years, it really isn't a date.
There's no date.
Because, yeah.
So
Okay.
this,
Whoop, go ahead.
oh, sorry. So this resolution looks like it's for phase 4.
Correct.
Now, but the funding we have is for phase 2 from center to 550.
No, so We currently have.
phase 3?
Yeah, we have funding for phase 3. Funding for phase 4 became available October of this year.
Okay, so we're gonna go from Center Street to 1400.
This just allows us to start design for
Okay.
phase 4. But yes, ultimately, construction, we're hoping in the following summer to get from 550 up to 1400 north.
I think you should lock him down on that, Mike.
I
Say
think I
by
should.
2025 that'll be done.
So we've locked down Center to 550, right? We've locked that down by 24?
We're
Okay.
I'm comfortable and confident we can get that put together with MAG, and like I said, we have a bid out there. We're just trying to get that more in line with our funding.
So the 550 to 1400 is a pioneering road.
All of it is a.
Oh, all of it is.
Yes. So that's what MAG authorized. That's what we're getting. Development has, through the Condi development, they have actually built the southbound, which will ultimately become the southbound lanes. So from 550 to Center, we could have north and southbound lanes there functioning.
But you've got enough ground to expand it out to the 5 lanes
Yeah.
that it's intended for.
So to follow up on Mike's, what's your best guess or a date to get it to 14 from 550 to 14?
I'm not really sure. The hope would be that we get design going this year, and that it's in the build season for 2025. So
Okay.
the summer of 2025.
That would make me really happy if we
That's
could. Just 'cause
that's the goal,
it.
and that's the trajectory we're shooting for. So.
And because I know that getting to 4 South is really going to be a nightmare, but there is a workaround there for a lot of citizens. So if we could punch it to Provo, that'd be so nice.
That is the plan. We've got it, and the biggest thing is just the inflationary rates. And
Yeah, because what used to be 100 is now 2. Yeah.
exactly.
Yep. How much land does Community Park take up? So I see the creek going right through there between the 550 and the proposed phase 4 little marquee. I mean, does it go all the way down to the tracks, what the city owns? For Community Park?
Oh, no, Community Park, there is a property owner just east of 1500 that is, and then it goes property owner and then Community Park. So
Is it Everett's or something? I don't know.
Betty Stewart, I believe.
I'm just looking at, so if the orange goes where it's proposed right here, where that bisects the park.
It does, and you can see in the area we have placed some fill already that kind of mimics this.
Sorry, bisects the weed patch. Let me
But yes, this will go right through Community Park.
Yeah.
Okay, other questions for Jeff? Okay, entertain motion for approval. I can't make it.
10?
Number 11.
No, 11, yes,
Make a
okay.
motion to
Almost-
approve resolution number 2023-43 approving an interlocal cooperation agreement, ILA, between Utah County and Springville City outlining the respective rights and responsibilities for funding of the design and construction of the 1200 West to 550 North to 1400 North Phase 4 project.
Okay, I have a motion. Second.
I'll second.
Okay, roll call vote. Craig?
Yes.
Liz?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Jason?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Good job. Anything else we need to talk about? This is it? Chris? Jason? Liz?
Kinda
Thank you.
Kind of stings. I mean, I've been here for 6 years and I still haven't got anything done on Community Park.
You're gonna get a road.
Not during your time, though. There was a great sandbagging effort there, though.
I mean, I had to.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
I'll motion that we adjourn this meeting.
I'll second.
When I run for council on my 90th birthday, we'll get these roads done.
Those in favor?
Aye.
I love the park.
Oh, no.